Hi guys, welcome to the Made to Flourish podcast. I am Meg. I'm sitting here with Yasmina, and we are interviewing Sydney Mustard, who is a certified doula and midwife. And she actually was at Yasmina's third birth, which ended up being a transfer to a hospital. So she's going to talk about what it looks like to really have a home birth, who should consider it, what it entails. We talk about birth trauma, we talk about transferring, and we really get into the kind of personal care you receive when you enter into a midwifery model kind of birth. She also gets into detail about what kind of supplements pregnant women should be taking, what kind of tests they should be going through before they get pregnant and while they're pregnant, and the kind of diet that she suggests for a lot of pregnant women. I hope you guys enjoy this. This is a full-packed, awesome podcast, all things birth and pregnancy. Please join us.
I'm Sydney Mustard, and I'm a wife to Chris Mustard. I'm mom to 4 children, Grayson, Dylan, Ashley, and Carter. All adult children. Only 2 of them live at home with me.
Wow.
One will be getting married in May, so we're excited about planning her wedding.
Do all of us have 4 kids? I know, it's just like I didn't realize that you had 4.
Yeah,
3 boys and 1 girl.
3 boys, 1 girl.
Right now are 3 girls and 1 boy, both of us.
That's awesome.
And it's cool.
I'm a certified professional midwife, and I doulaed for a long time before deciding that I wanted to step into the role of a midwife. I waited until my children were all very self-sufficient. At home, we homeschooled.
Oh, wow.
So I was able to stay home with them. And then once I knew that I could be away from them and they didn't need my full-time supervision, I thought that it would be a great idea to start apprenticing.
Wow.
So how long have you been in the midwifery world then?
So I started apprenticing with 7 Cities Midwifery Care in 2018 was when I attended my first birth with them. I met the midwives when I was a doula at my friend's first home birth.
Wow.
And that's how I met them. And then about 10 years later was when I contacted them to reach out to see if they were in need of an apprentice.
Wow.
And it unfolded that way.
That's amazing.
Did you have any home births?
I did not. My oldest son was born at Lee because I worked at labor and delivery there as an administrative associate. So I had him there in 98. And then had all of the other 3 at the Midwifery Center in DePaul with Nell and Stacy and Blair.
Yes, Blair delivered Flora. Yeah, my firstborn. I had that at the birth center. Interesting experience, but one of the reasons why I switched to home births.
Yeah. So I wasn't educated enough at the time to even know that home birth was a thing.
Right.
So that was the closest thing that I knew to
It's a great
physiological birth. And then in 2000, it was very physiological. It was very hands off. It was very,
Wow.
It was beautiful.
That's amazing.
At the midwifery center that once existed. Okay, wow, that's very cool.
Yeah.
It is cool.
Yeah.
We have a lot of people reaching out asking us questions about midwifery. A lot of people interested in home births. I kind of wanted to ask you if you were to just explain like what home birth actually is and like what the care is like to someone who doesn't really have any experience with home birth. How would you explain it?
It is so intimate, very personalized, very individualized, and intimate. It's a relationship building process. You're inviting someone into your most sacred and intimate space. And they get to see more of your life, really, than most people truly do.
So true.
During prenatal appointments, Yasmina can attest, we kind of get down to some good nitty gritty stuff. We don't just care about your physical being. We care about whole aspects of your being because it affects your labor and birth.
Yeah.
And so...
Have you seen that a lot?
Oh, yeah.
Like when there's like disputes between spouses or if there's like trauma, like emotional trauma, you've seen that like affect.
We see it play out even in like friend groups or having difficulties with children. If you have a blended family, those things tend to come up in there. And it's really wild to walk through these things with these women and then see how it unfolds from beginning to end.
Absolutely. I think you said like 3 key words that I think would be good to focus on, like personalized, intimate, and then you said one more word that my pregnancy brain just now lost. But I would say even just focusing on it being personable and intimate are like really big things that are missing in the standardized like
Medical
model of care. And I think even when we were deciding to go for round 4, but really round 3 of trying a home birth for this baby, one of the discussions Akeem and I had to have, or that I had to even just like remind him of, was that, because of Zion's first. So what people don't know is Sydney was actually a part of my third birth experience. We'll call it a birth experience because that's absolutely what it was.
Yeah.
With that going unplanned and leading to emergency C-section, the question then was, when we found we were pregnant again, well, how are we going to do this? And we had the opportunity, I think, to either lean into like fear and projection of like that could happen again, or choose to see the whole picture of like what this process could look like. And what I had to remind Akeem was, I want to pay for the care. Like I want to invest into like the good care that's going to be personalized and intimate, and that you just do not get when you're going through like a typical OBGYN practice, because again, you're working with like 6 different doctors. You have no idea which doctor is going to be there at your birth. You are put into a system and a standardized process. And that's for them to,
and the insurance companies are actually
companies
calling the shots. So like when they say like, these are our standards, or this is what high risk is, it's not based off of you as a person, it's based off of the insurance companies.
Right. And it's like, again, we're not hating on, we understand why they have to do what they do, but you have to understand that if you choose a hospital birth, you are choosing to put yourself into that system versus home birth. You get to be a whole person. Your whole personhood gets to be considered and nurtured through the process. And to me, that's like worth the investment, because again, I think when we think about risk at the end, there is time, right? And that's something I would love for you to eventually speak into, because I think that's kind of like the big unknown for couples, especially husbands who like might be new to this concept of home birth. It's like, well, what if something happens? And I don't know, maybe now is a good time for her to speak into that, but how would you speak to that process? Because I think like people assume like the minute they enter like labor, it's like emergency. Like it's either like emergency
All hands on deck,
or there's just like this unknown space that people don't understand, that how a midwife would handle and navigate that space.
It's so hard because you're walking someone through what you don't know. We're always thinking 6 and 8 steps ahead, what we've seen, what we've experienced in previous births, or what we've heard or been taught. And so we're trying for the best outcome possible without projecting. Right? But to speak to a risk, I loved the podcast that I listened to where Dr. Stu Fishbein actually said, I can't stand the word risk. It's fear-based. I love he changed the word to chances.
Okay.
So anytime somebody would insert the word risks or benefits, he would say, switch it up to chances and benefits. The chances of something happen, they want to give you a percentage. Well, if you did the math on all of those percentages, you would actually go, oh, well, the chances of that are unlikely. Can they happen? Yes, but it's not likely. And if you're one of the lucky ones that it does get to happen to, well, then that's when you have a different conversation. So to be able to speak to how to help your husbands, your family members.
So that's a big thing to family members.
And your friends who either may have had bad experiences or are very, very concerned. That's where a lot of research can come in handy. And I know that can be overwhelming.
Give us some places you would send a woman.
So the first place that I would go for a mom and dad to sit down together would be to watch the documentary, The Business of Being Born.
That's 100% my first thing to tell people to watch.
Like, so eye-opening. Listening to Dr. Stu's podcast, Birthing Instincts.
Okay.
He is a no-nonsense OB who he kind of lays it out in layman's terms. Very much makes sense. Right? And so I would listen to that. Listen to Home Sweet Home Birth podcasts. And then really sit and listen to your wife's heart or to your friend's heart and get down to the business of why do you feel passionate about wanting to take full responsibility of your health and birth this way? Because that's essentially what you're doing. You're saying, I want to be 100% in control of what I eat, what I drink, how I move my body, what supplements I take, how I care for myself spiritually, mentally, emotionally, who I surround myself with. And when you do those things, you have a great toolbox.
Yeah. And there's some people, I guess, that's a really good point to talking about responsibility, because there have been people I've talked to that are like, I want to be responsible for that. Like, I would rather I'd rather just be told what to do. And that's like to each their own.
Right.
But I feel like a lot of women are starting to realize that they do want to have more responsibility and they're allowed to have responsibility over their birth and their body.
Right. I feel like we tend to have like a martyr syndrome sometimes, especially when it comes to birth, because it is such a personal experience that each person, provider included, anybody in the birth team, husband included, doesn't want to own their part in the process of the outcome, especially the parents.
Yeah.
Because it's such a tender moment that no matter the outcome, whether you were able to preserve a vaginal birth at home the way that you wanted to, there are still moms who struggle with, wow, that was the most intense and wild thing that I'll ever do. And I don't know that I'm okay with that. Like, that was a lot for me. And they have to sit with that.
Yeah.
Right. And be able to take ownership of the part that they played in that, as well as all of the other people.
Ooh, that's like a big one with our society, not being able to take ownership, because we've allowed like ego and identity, misplacing our identity and the wrong things to come into play. And so like, we're not able to really be honest with ourselves, because we're like, if I admit to what I did or what part I played there, it makes me bad, versus like, no, like this has nothing to do with who you are.
Right.
I feel like there is actually healing that comes to honesty. And we have a lot of women who are dealing with birth trauma now. I mean, the stats are crazy with birth trauma. It's like, now it's like 1 of every 3 women, I think, say they've had experienced birth trauma. But like, part of that healing process is to be able to honestly walk through it and like separate who you are from what's happened. And that's hard to do when you don't allow ego to die and don't have the right people to walk you through it.
And providers have birth trauma.
Yeah.
And so we have to walk through that as well. It's quite difficult to try to help a mom walk through that experience, specifically if we weren't the provider where they experience the birth trauma.
Right.
We're sitting on this side of it, listening to their account, and we can empathize. And we're very compassionate with their experience, but we don't know what the provider was presented with and how it affected that provider or the decisions that they made. And that's a whole other that you can kind of go down, because from the perspective of a midwife, we're trying to preserve everything that our families want, right? And we do all the very best that we can to make sure that all of those things happen. And when they don't, we take it personally, right? We're so invested.
Right.
And we don't just take clients personally. We don't take clients that we don't feel are great candidates for home birth, because we know that we may not be able to honestly give you all that you're wanting.
Right. Which is great.
So
yeah, so good.
Into another question.
Yeah. So, I mean, we have people that have reached out to us and like asked us questions on our Instagram platform. And like, I'm wondering, like, there was a lady who reached out recently who was like, I hemorrhaged at the hospital my last birth. So like, she's like, I kind of had a traumatic birth. I really want to have a home birth this time. Like, basically, what do you think? And I know that like each provider is different, but like, what do you say to women who've experienced like that kind of birth trauma? And they're like, I want a different experience, but like, I'm feeling scared, or I had this medical history. Who would accept me? Who wouldn't? And
sure,
do certain things like having a previous hemorrhage or
certain high risk, high chance.
Even a lot like do midwives have the ability to actually accept those as clients?
Yes.
Okay.
In August of 2023, we were given a formulary for emergency meds to be able to carry.
Wow.
So that changed a lot in the community for community midwives.
So you're pretty equipped walking into it.
Correct.
Yeah.
that doesn't mean that transfer still can't happen with postpartum hemorrhage. It just gives us a better chance to control things than
you can take
what
the
it
first
used
steps
to.
that a hospital would take. Administering Pitocin or,
Yep, that's right. So we had like a first line of defense. I would say to a mom that had that history that before she decided to get pregnant again,
if she has that privilege, Sydney.
yeah. Well, yes, but
Sometimes things
some of
happen.
us like Tasmina. Even if postpartum, like she knew like that was her experience, I would probably give her information about how to best nourish herself and work on like her insufficiencies and deficiencies, micronutrients, all of those things.
Wow.
Like
You want to run labs.
I would want to run labs and I would say, okay, let's get you on these supplements. Let's get you on these foods. Let's incorporate these things and let's get you really good and healthy before conception.
Yeah.
And then let's draw again when you get pregnant and let's see where your body. We took a really amazing functional lab analysis class and it has been pretty eye-opening of the.
What are some trends you're seeing?
Like you can see predictive markers for like
Tell me.
gestational diabetes, preeclampsia, like running the panel that we run now and being able to analyze it through a functional maternity lens is
what are some
really
of the markers?
helped us.
Like what are you seeing? Like is it like mineral deficiencies? Like,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So like if through complete metabolic panels, like you can see there's patterns that we'll see that aren't just anemia. They're not just thyroid. They all are connected.
Can you mind getting detailed with me? Like what kind of labs would you tell a person? Just if there's someone listening who are like, I want to run labs and see where I'm at. Like, what would you tell them? Like hair mineral analysis?
I would say let's do a complete blood count with differential. Let's do a complete metabolic panel, a full thyroid panel, full iron panel, vitamin D, hemoglobin A1C, a lot of vitamins like magnesiums, all of those kinds of things.
And can you do that at your regular like health provider? They can just pull this for you?
Yes, we can pull them.
That's really good to know.
Yeah.
I think people feel really overwhelmed when they want to know what's going on internally, but they don't even know what to Google search. They're like, I don't even know what to ask for.
Oh, Google's the worst.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of different testing. Some of them are really expensive. Like there's like the Dutch test, like the dried urine, test, which like shows you really good insights to like your cortisol and different hormones. Then you have your hair mineral analysis test. And then you have just like a blood panel, which sometimes isn't the most detailed that you'd want, or like a thyroid. You're like, oh, you're within range. And you're like, what range?
And to be honest, it's still all very, very new. Like I've only been out of the class for a year and I still look at some things and I'm like, I don't really even know what to make of that.
Right.
So then I can like message the functional
That's great.
medicine.
Have you kind of like partnered with a functional doctor?
We can get consults. We took her class, so it's nice to be able to say, hey, can we get a consult and like go over these labs if it's just like bog in my mind.
I'm glad that people are hearing this because I think that a lot of people, especially like husbands, would be like, they view midwifery or home birth as like very woo-woo, right? Like, oh, like you're going to come in and like do chakra or, just like, just like less than. Yeah. Or like, oh, someone's just going to show up and like try to catch a baby in a birth. They have no clue that you're coming in with, you have so much backing from other practitioners. Now I'm like learning, like you have so much equipment with you. You have medicine with you. You guys have a lot of resources that I feel like people don't know about.
Now. And it's kind of quite the opposite when you said less than.
Right.
Sometimes we overwhelm our clients because they weren't prepared that we were going to come at them probably with so much information.
Yeah.
It can be very overwhelming. So to be able to tell a mom who's had a previous postpartum hemorrhage, I would want to make sure that, that you're functioning optimally. And then what can we do during pregnancy to maintain that?
Yeah.
And then I would probably say, let's have a conversation with some good informed consent on what managing third stage actively at home could be for you. If you experienced a postpartum hemorrhage and that was traumatic for her, would you like for us to manage your third stage actively? Meaning, would you like for us to go ahead and administer Pitocin immediately after birth?
Right.
And then monitor from there. And usually our moms will say yes. Usually our dads will say absolutely yes.
Yeah.
Right? And then we kind of go from there.
Right. Good.
So, yeah.
I do want to hear about switching from birth trauma to, I'm sure you've experienced much more of this actually, is like the best births and the most like peaceful and like just like the births that are really like highlighted in your brain. Like, what is a common thread that you've seen with women? How have they set themselves up to have like beautiful home births? What's something that you've seen like a commonality?
Yeah.
So at the actual birth, the main theme of each one of those was quiet. The whole atmosphere was quiet.
Interesting.
That is
The
really
room
so
was
primal.
quiet.
So primal.
Yes. Like when we entered the space, it felt like I was into like a different world. It was quiet. No music, nothing. It was just silent. I can think probably off the top of my head of 5 that I was like, wow, this was really cool. Right? Every single birth to me is so beautiful in each of its own way, because then I can think of like another 5 off the top of my head where these moms had to literally roar their babies out, and it was
powerful
and beautiful.
I want to be the cute mom that's just like, I sound like a water buffalo. I'm like, "Ugh."
But your birth with Meadow was like pretty dang close to that. I mean, you kind of like chuckled.
I did laugh.
Like
yeah.
there was like a laugh, there was like a joy, there was like a breath.
Yeah.
You know, when she came out, it was like
Yeah.
really cool.
Yeah, I'm pretty chatty at the very end. I like him. Yeah, but I'm very quiet.
Yasmina was very chatty too.
Yeah.
She was beautiful.
Yeah.
And
And the laboring.
Yeah.
in the
and
laboring
all.
things. It was
Yeah.
wild.
I do
She
want there to
led
be
with that.
I do want there to be like a lot of silence when I'm in labor. And that's one of the reasons that I've never had my kids involved in my labor, even though I love the thought of that.
Yeah.
I like am so internal, and when I hear chatter, which isn't often, but there's been a few times where I've like heard like conversations in the background of my labor, I'm like so annoyed. I'm like so bothered by that.
And we tell our moms, like, when we come in, we try our best to be quiet. We don't know how to open up a trash bag quietly, but
Yeah.
we really try hard.
Yeah.
But if you hear us whispering, or if you hear us doing something and it's annoying to you, tell us to shut up.
Yeah.
Don't tiptoe around.
Yeah,
Just be
yeah.
like, hey, y'all.
Not
I
now.
remember
Not now.
doing that with Ellie when we got to the birth suite with
Mhm.
Eliana, and there was like someone's phone went off, and I was like, turn that off.
Definitely
Like turn it off.
Yeah, it doesn't be off. It's annoying. What about in preparation? What have you seen these moms do in preparation that has made their births?
Yeah, so a good in-person childbirth education class that can speak to home births
Yeah.
is a really good resource.
Agreed.
We feel like it's one of the best ways for dads to
Agreed.
be able to engage and kind of,
Feel more empowered.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and introduce them to words and movements
Yeah.
and positions that they may not have ever seen before.
Visualizing how this whole thing's gonna go down.
And
It's so
hearing other people ask questions that they may not think to ask,
helpful. Yeah.
they go, oh, and that might spark,
Right.
another conversation. I would also say a lot of reading
Yeah.
of good books.
Ooh, name some.
Oh, gosh.
Animes.
Yeah, all of Anime's books are really
I really
good.
like Mama Natural book. Wait, we're gonna say spiritual.
Yeah, spiritual midwifery.
Yeah.
That was always
Yeah, that's cool.
one with the stories that, you can
Yeah.
just read other people's stories. Listening to really good podcasts. If you're not a reader, if you don't
Yeah.
have time to sit and read.
Have you ever read Supernatural Childbirth? It's a really short book.
I haven't.
It's on audiobook.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's little, but there's just tons of
cool.
stories of people having like supernatural childbirths where they just like are not in a ton of pain in labor. Not saying that I can necessarily 100% relate with that. As someone who like read it and was like, oh, I can have a pain-free labor. I'm like, there was uncomfortable moments for sure. But I still think that I always recommend people who like love the Lord start there.
I would even say too, like for me, I'm super visual. So like I've been just watching birth videos. I'm just like watching how the women are engaging in that process, and it's giving me the visual that I need to like engage with in my
Right.
body, and kind of know how to like move myself when I get into that. I'm curious too, have you noticed like women's breath work or just like their things that they're saying to themselves in those moments, anything like that that has been, or just like certain movements or like the support system that they have,
Or a
anything like
mindset.
that? Yeah, that you've seen.
Yeah, their mental game
Mm-hmm.
has to be quite strong.
Yeah, agreed.
Right. There's a level of competitiveness that enters that birth world, right?
It's so true. It's so true.
You want to win.
Yeah.
And you're willing to go the distance. We compare it to running a marathon, and it is true. There are different parts of a full marathon where you want to give up.
Yeah.
And mile 19 is one of those specifically. It was for me. I wanted to just be like, okay, somebody come pick me up.
Absolutely.
But my husband had to come alongside me. It wasn't even a race that he had entered into. And he finished the race with me, knowing that I looked at him like, not doing this. And he was like, yes, you are.
Yeah.
We're going to do this. Let's go. So having that support to say, you're good.
Yeah. You can do this.
You can do
So
this.
close.
Yeah. I think the preparation for first-time moms is very different from moms who have had multiple children.
It's true.
First-time moms, the good toolboxes, of course, are the childbirth education class. Lots of reading. Stay off Google.
Seriously.
Please stay off Google.
Only positive birth story videos.
Yes. If you have questions, reach out to your provider through
good.
email or something like that, but just leave Google out of it. Being able to possibly employ a doula. That can be very, very helpful for first-time moms, especially dads who don't know how to navigate that process. It can be very helpful. For families who have had multiple children, they tend to lean on the experiences that they've had previously. And so working through those, maybe even having some talk therapy, being able to work through any of those fears, because they already know what postpartum looks like. So sometimes I see a lot of moms skip over the preparation of their labor and their birth because they're so anxious about that postpartum period, because they know what that lack of sleep is going to feel like. They know what the hunger, they know what the thirst, they know what the discomfort, the engorgement, the constantly being touched is going to feel like. So they don't prepare their mind well for the labor and birth process, and skip over that and to go to postpartum, which is important to prepare for. But when you've already had that experience, you tend to go, okay, well, I've got that.
Body's going to do its thing.
Right.
Yeah.
But so I'm going to focus more on that. And so I love to be able to sit with a mom and go, okay, how are you envisioning your birth this time?
Because we need to envision it.
Yeah, it's so interesting. You've had really different birth experiences. All three of my home births were all 4-hour births. All of them, I needed a kickstart, whether it was castor oil or multiple cervix strippings or whatever. And like most of them, like I was at 42 weeks. Like I was just like at my wit's end. But I will say that like my mindset in each one of those births was so different, despite like the outcome all being the same. With my last birth, I like literally didn't think I was progressing like the whole time. When I tell you this, like I mean it. Like my midwife calls it the trapdoor cervix, because I have like my hand like fully inside me. I'm like checking myself. I don't feel anything. I don't feel any pressure on my tailbone. I don't feel like I have to poop. I don't feel any pressure in my vagina. Nothing. Like I'm not feeling anything. And within like 3 minutes of saying like I'm not getting anywhere, she was crowning into my hand. It was insane. And I remember looking back on that and being like, my one regret of Meadow's birth was doubting that things were happening. But like, you know, my other experiences were like, you know, I started to feel the pressure. I started to feel grunty. I started to feel this like sensation in me that like let me know that like the baby was starting to make its way down. And this time around, I didn't have that. And so it made me doubt, you know, those past experiences made me kind of be like, something's going on.
Yeah. I think another thing that we like to talk about with our moms, whether you're a first-time mom or whether you've had children, that while it's good to take in all of these positive stories, one trend that we see a lot is this whole guided pushing thing. The birth community they're very passionate about, don't tell me when to push, or you're going to need to breathe your baby down, or there's going to be some fetal, eject reflex that they see all of these edited home birth videos of women just,
It's true.
and their baby's just slipping out. But they don't see that hours and hours and hours, right, of work that went into that.
So true.
And so specifically, we see it more in first-time moms where they don't feel like they are going to need to really bear down hard to bring their baby forth.
Okay.
And so we counsel that a lot, actually. And we're like, listen, we know that you hear a lot of these, breathe your baby down. Well, sometimes I want to go, no, not, I need for you to roar your baby out.
So you ask them to push. The partner with a contraction to push.
If you're seeing
If we're seeing that there's really no movement, heart tones are starting to not do great things and not recover well, like those kinds of instances, that's why you have a provider there to be able to tell you, hey, this is what we're seeing. Are you okay if I give you some guidance into this pushing thing?
Wow.
We are always going to give informed consent, but we don't want anybody to be sensationalized that babies just slide down and out. For some women, they do. For most women, they don't. We had a mom who gave birth to her 11th baby.
Wow.
And had, baby, it was just a very hard, she had to give a lot of effort that she had never given before, and it took her by surprise that we were having to kind of give her that guidance, because most of the times the babies just really did slide in and out. So we want our moms to know that while births can be similar, and if you've had...
Also, it's not like good versus bad, because I feel like there's a lot of
That's
women.
what yes. Thank
There's
you.
a lot of
That's
women who are
exactly
like,
what I was
oh,
getting
I
at.
had to push. I made noises. I wasn't like calm. I wasn't this, I wasn't that. Like, we all love a beautiful, a beautiful birth video where the woman's just like, and it happens, of course. But that's just not the norm. Yeah. It's like primal. It's
And I think that when you see these titles, beautiful birth video, beautiful home birth, it's a thing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that birth over here, that was loud and messy and primal and looked chaotic, was beautiful.
Totally.
So good.
It was beautiful because that mom worked so hard to get her baby.
And I also feel like when I'm in birth, I have to check myself and be like, I want to honor what I am in nature. What am I going to be like naturally in my birth? I'm not quiet, I'm not, and when the baby comes out, I'm not going to be quiet. And even after I have a baby, in my mind, I was like, oh, I want to cry and just cuddle. And instead, I'm chatty Cathy. I'm like, I'm just super ecstatic. I have in my mind what I almost wish I could look like in labor. But I'm like, I just want to honor what my body actually wants to sound like, what it wants to do, what it wants to look like. I just want to I just want to be normal. I just want my body to be normal.
And some moms need a good few moments to catch up with themselves.
Yeah, true.
Some moms aren't ready to sniff their baby's ear, talk to their baby.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're like, oh, my Lanta, this just happened to me. And they need a minute.
Yeah.
Some dads need
Yeah.
that, right?
Yeah.
I never wanted Chris to be right up near me. I wanted him right here. If I needed to touch him, I could. If I wanted to pull him close, I could. And when I wanted to shove him away, I could. But I wanted my midwife right here.
Yeah.
And then when baby was born, all I wanted was to connect with her eyes to tell me that I did a great job and that everything was okay.
Yeah.
Every woman is very different. That's why it's so personal and intimate and individualized, because each one is very, very different.
So true.
And that's the pull of midwifery,
Right.
to be able to give that to each woman as they need it, and to be able to feel like you can read a room, if you will.
Yeah. I can imagine. It's probably a really interesting space for you to sit in as a midwife too, because every person has such different temperaments and different life experiences and different ways of handling high intense situations. And some really need a mommy feeling. They want that nurturing, that some really want space and some really need. So I imagine that's probably a very interesting
It is.
for you guys to navigate.
Because
for clients.
innately, I think as women, we want to be all things to all people.
Yeah.
Right. We never want to disappoint. We want everybody to love us.
Yeah.
Right. We want to feel accepted in our communities, in our families. But the reality of that is that I'm not the mom for everyone. I'm not the friend for everyone. I'm not the midwife for everyone. Right. And the other reality is that midwives are human and we have personal lives outside of our jobs. And so it's hard to step from one to the other. It's hard to come from a very sacred space where somebody just took their very first breath.
Yeah.
I get a little emotional when I think of that. It's a very sacred and holy space to then go outside or get in your car and the world around you is just going. So that's,
Yeah.
I'm still there this morning.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
I know. I always say
I
that.
don't
Like,
want to sound silly.
you don't sound silly at all. No,
We're all
it's so
about it.
true. And like, this is what I always tell my husband, it's so crazy about birth, is that it is the most insane event on planet Earth, and yet we all exist because someone gave birth to us.
Yeah.
It's the most normal and the most insane at the very same time.
Yeah, it is. It's so, and it's overwhelming. And that's why it's hard when somebody gives you an advice of, well, you can't get that invested. I don't know how you can't
Right.
get that invested. So being able to flip that light switch on and off is is something that I'm still learning how to do because I don't know that I do that very well.
Yeah.
So
It probably makes you also a pretty good midwife to be able to. Yeah.
I pray so. I'm sure like somebody could catch me on a bad day. We all have bad days. We all respond, especially with lack of sleep. I mean, we as moms do that, right? When you haven't had enough sleep, you're a very different mom,
100%.
right?
Oh my gosh. It's
So
and also they're finding out now that women actually need more sleep than what we've been told. We've been told 8 hours, but those were all done on men. We need 10 hours. I was like, when I found that out, I was like, oh my goodness, how does anyone have the time to sleep 10 hours a day?
I know because that fella over here, he said, I'll sleep when I'm dead. And he truly means it.
Men
Like,
are
it
just
doesn't-
different.
Like Akeem can function off of like 5 hours sleep just fine.
Yes.
If I slept for 5 hours,
Damn,
3
you're
days in a row, I would be hungover. Yeah. You'd have to pull me over. Like I would be
That's a
so-
little how I'm feeling. That's
Yeah.
a good analogy. I do. I feel a little like, wow, it was a riffle.
Yeah.
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 That's why I didn't want to sound so silly.
Sydney, for content, Sydney had a birth that she was at till 5 a.m. this morning.
Yeah.
How many days were
11
you?
o'clock, so.
Yeah, 5. How many days were you laboring with that mom? Or how many hours?
So I was with her all day yesterday, probably from about, for context, it's all a blur.
Yeah.
In my head, but it was in the early morning hours. But yeah.
Can you tell for our audience that's not so familiar with home birth and midwives, what exactly is a midwife and what exactly do you provide for your clients? Because I know that some people, when they hear about midwives and they start asking me questions or talking to me about it, they're explaining like a doula. And I'm like, oh, my midwife doesn't do that. Like all that.
Maybe explaining the difference between you and a doula. I think that's a really big question.
Oh.
I think that would help people a lot for sure.
Okay. So a doula is a wonderful tool to have
Absolutely.
at your births for physical and emotional support for the mom and the dad. They can come in and help with positioning. They can come in and help with nourishment, emotional support, all those things. Advocacy, if you're having a hospital birth, that's a great tool to help advocate for you if you feel like you need that. So those are the first things that kind of come to mind.
But as a midwife, you're not necessarily, do people depend on you like a doula as a midwife?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's hard when you've been a doula, take that hat off and put on the hat of a midwife.
Yeah.
However, it's important because when we get to a birth and we do vitals and we set up, really what we're doing after that is observing and we're listening and we're kind of taking all of these things into consideration, thinking those 6 to 8 steps ahead, like, okay, what can this look like and what are my plan? B, C, D, right? And so our brains are on midwifery, you
Right.
know, the medical aspect of it. But there are times if we see a mom that is struggling,
Right.
or that we see that there could be some advice given, a suggestion made, we'll say, hey, maybe you could consider this. And then it's kind of hard because we're doing doula, midwife. And I have to be very careful of that. I'm very guilty
I would have the same problem
of wanting to nurture.
That's a good point then, I guess. Like a doula is the nurturing side of things.
A very nurturing side of things.
And a midwife is more of the medical need or the physical
Right. We're
heart
holding
rate.
a safe space.
Right.
Like there's a target space for home births, and we want everything to stay within that normal, good target, right?
Yeah.
And when we see things starting to go outside of that target, there are a few things that we have in our toolbox that we can help to bring that back inside normal. And if it happens pretty quickly, then we're good. If it doesn't, then we have to.
So you're talking about like what?
Shift.
Heart rate?
Like heart rate, blood pressure, temperature. We're assessing for signs and symptoms of infection.
Okay.
All of those things. And so we want to make sure maternal exhaustion. What is this going to look like? Third stage. Right. We want to make sure that everything is good. So being able to stay in that mindset is really important. And so a lot of times families are like, well, I don't need a doula because I have a midwife. And we're like,
I always tell first-time birth moms or first-time moms that I'm like, a doula and a midwife are not the same. You need a doula. If anything, just for your husband. Like, have a doula for your husband.
yeah.
Because a lot of men feel so helpless in birth. And I'm going to be Yaz's doula this time around, or like unofficial. But I was at her birth with Ellie. Yes. And I just remember thinking like my goal was to like direct Akeem to Yasmina, because I knew that like she really wanted Akeem to be like her main birth support. So like in my mind, I was like, I really want to help Akeem, help Yasmina, instead of just trying to step in and like help Yasmina. Like, so I don't know. I just feel like it's good for people to know that like doulas are really not just there for you, but also there for your spouse as well.
That's beautiful. I like how you said direct a king to her. That's a really beautiful picture, because guys are thinking also 6 steps ahead. They just don't know how to communicate that to us. And so they're thinking of you. They're thinking of your home. They're thinking of your children. And so being able to keep them focused on the main thing is really beautiful.
And remind them like, this is good. The bees are hearing the woman get really like grunty, really loud. This is good. This is progress. You know what I mean? Like encouraging them.
Yeah.
I wanted you to kind of get a little bit detailed with me from step 1 to you're having your last appointment with your person. Like let's say I'm like a client and I'm coming to you for a baby. Like, how would you be my midwife? What would be our appointments?
Yeah.
And then what would the birth look like? And then what would our postpartum appointments look like?
So we'd have a meet and greet first.
Okay.
Where we would bring you in and you get to interview us.
And that's free.
Yep, that's free. And we would interview you really at the same time, because we want to make sure that we're a good fit.
Yeah.
You're inviting me into your home, into your life, and you need to make sure that
We're going to mesh.
right? And we always like to tell our parents too, it's nothing personal, right? But it is personal.
Right.
And you need to think of it as personal, because we want you to feel good with us. And then we bring you in for your initial appointment. It's anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour. We do blood work there, and we talk about all things nutrition. We talk all things supplementation, all things spiritual, emotional, mental, questions about finances, questions about any of the documents that we've given you that we're required by the state to provide, and some that are not required that are just good practice. Any questions that you may have from them, we kind of go over all of that. Talk to you about best ways to communicate with us, be it, emergencies or non-emergent ways to communicate with us. And then we schedule you monthly, for your prenatal appointments, and use the chat option on your electronic health record, or email us in between those appointments if you have questions, that can't wait until your next appointment. Each appointment is usually about that 30 to 45 minutes.
People bring their babies in or their kids.
Yes. Yeah.
It's amazing.
Family. We specifically love it when dads and families and anybody who may be at the birth can come.
Love that.
And get to meet us, because then we're familiar to you. You're not opening the door to us and meeting us for the first time. You have no idea who we are. And so you don't really have a trust for somebody that you've never met. So that's another kind of thing that you can tell dads, like, hey,
go to those appointments.
Just because I'm having a home birth doesn't mean we don't want you to know the provider.
Right.
Even it's more important that you do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then at about 32 weeks, we start seeing you every other week.
And do you do a home visit then?
At 36 weeks, we come and do a home visit.
I love that.
Check your birth supplies.
Yeah.
Make sure that we know where to park. We know where your laundry is. If there's like any like things that we should know about child locks or
True.
you know, like
What room you're going to recover in.
yeah, like where do you want to have this birth? Maybe give you some suggestions of things. You said you wanted a birth tub, but your bathtub looks beautiful. I think you could receive your baby right there in your own bathtub. Like giving suggestions that, you know, we've seen work.
Yeah.
Saying, hey, this is kind of crowded over here. Maybe if you just move some of these things, it would provide more space for you to labor. Things like that. Really important for us to do that home visit so that we know which house to go into at 2 o'clock in the morning, because we may or may not have slipped into the wrong house. So we do these things because
it's so
we've experienced them before.
And then so after a baby's born, do you show up the next day? It was your
So about 24 to 36 hours. Like if you have your baby at 2 o'clock in the morning, we're not going to come back at 2 o'clock in the morning the next day. It might be like 10 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
And we can provide any of the newborn screenings that you desire to have. We give lots of informed consent all throughout your pregnancy as it pertains to blood work, ultrasounds, gestational diabetes testing, group B strep testing, all of those things that are really like protocol. We give informed consent and we get to support your choice in those. So the same thing applies for newborn screenings. We bring birth certificate information back at that visit. We do a full look over on mom. We do another full newborn exam. Make sure that you don't have any concerns. A lot of phone contact in between these visits. And then we come back for another visit at about the 5 to 7 day mark. And then again, around the 10 to 14 day mark. So you're getting 3 home postpartum visits.
How great to not have to like leave your bed.
With full phone contact. Like when we go on call for you, that's when you get full access to us.
My midwife has like so many pictures of like my nipples on her phone because I'm like, hey, like it looks like a football. Like what's wrong?
Yeah.
Latch is probably off. You know, like it's so nice to have that. Like that's one of my favorite parts of like the postpartum period with a home birth midwife.
Yeah, we can just kind of text in.
Yeah.
And we like to say, if you're going to text us, we just prefer you to call because I'm probably going to call you back because I'm going to have like follow-up questions.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And then we bring you back in the office for your 6-week visit with an hour-long pelvic floor therapy evaluation.
Oh my gosh. That's right.
So we partnered with Dr. Liz Martin.
Oh my gosh.
And she comes to the office. So we schedule 30 to 45 minutes for our 6-week postpartum visit, and then you go in and have your evaluation.
That's incredible.
Amazing. With her.
Wow.
So
Yeah, we were just talking before you came. Actually, we're like, we need to get a pelvic floor therapist on here to talk about all things pelvic floor health, because it's one of those things. It's kind of becoming newer information to people.
Yeah.
Women are like learning about this era, this like area in us that we actually need to nurture.
we would love it if it
And
just became
strengthen.
standard of care.
I know. Wouldn't it be amazing?
Yeah.
Maybe it will.
Maybe it will. Well, it's got to be consumer driven. Just like midwifery care has to be consumer driven. Midwives can fight for privileges all we want to, but until families demand their insurance companies to pay for these services, you know.
That's true. Do you see a difference in women who have like chiropractic care and have pelvic floor care beforehand? Do they tend to have smoother births, or is it just kind of just depends?
That's a hard question.
I didn't know if you've seen a trend, because I remember learning about
I love it if women get chiropractic care. I can tell you, in my experience, I had chiropractic care all throughout one of my pregnancies and postpartum, and it was hands down. I never felt better.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Personally, I can speak to that. I do see that women they feel better. We love acupuncture.
Yeah.
We love prenatal massages. We love when women can go and have like therapy sessions.
Yeah.
Like, counseling is so important.
It's so good.
We love that. But these are all like amazing tools that we want.
It's one of those things where I think I've been learning every time going in, like, we can do all that we can, right? Like, we can be fully prepared, do all the things, go to chiropractic, do all the right things. And kind of, you know, have expectation with that, or you're investing in those things because you hope that it will produce good fruit. It's a good while simultaneously being very surrendered to like whatever's will be.
It's a really good like mirror of what motherhood's actually like.
One,
because you can do all the things for your kids, but ultimately like they're gonna be their own person. It's like the same thing with like birth is like a really good practice on mothering.
Yeah.
So true.
It is. Like you just said, you can have all the tools in your toolbox.
And it's still just working.
It just not go the way that you envisioned it to be. And it can be heartbreaking and disappointing. And it is for the families. It is for your providers.
Yeah.
Every provider feels it.
Yeah.
There isn't a transfer that ever gets easier. I don't care if it ends well.
Yeah.
Like if you are able to preserve the birth mostly that you wanted, or if it ends up differently. It never is easy because it wasn't what you wanted.
Right.
It's not right.
You have to agree to provide.
And it's not what we wanted. And we grieve it.
Yeah.
We grieve it hard. We just can't show it all the time because we want to encourage you that, we surrendered to a process that was bigger than us. And we did all that we could. And baby called the shots. Yasmina, your baby called the shots for sure.
My son Zion.
He sure did. He just called the shots. And we did all the things that we knew to do, that we felt comfortable doing.
Totally.
And each provider has their own comfort level. Right?
Yeah.
And that's where that interview process is very important.
It is.
Right? I'm going to be able to tell you like where my hard line is, but even that hard line is a soft line. Because if we get to that hard line and I'm like, Lord, is everything okay? Is it good? And sometimes it is. And sometimes it's, you know what? I need to make a decision. And that's what you hired me for.
Right.
And so I'm going to tell you what my best recommendation is. And ultimately it's your choice. But what I'm comfortable with is this.
This has been so insightful to like hear the heart behind a midwife, because I've only like my midwife feels like a friend, of course, but ultimately she was my provider. And to hear you talk about like the grief and like the birth trauma and just like the different things that you're experiencing as a provider, it's just like, it's been really insightful. It is beautiful.
Yeah, we want to help you like families walk through that, but it's hard because we're also walking through it from a different perspective.
I've never thought about that for you guys.
Yeah, it's emotional for us. It's hard for us. We know that there's a disappointment. We take it personal, even though it's not projected. And sometimes it's projected personally, but we understand that and we take it. It's just that it takes time. And a lot of times we don't want it to take time because we want this really pretty wrapped up package. And another thing is like, why did one person get it, but I couldn't? And there's a little bit of a jealousy. I've struggled with that. I struggled with it. Why did this one thing determine it? Why couldn't it happened at home for me? As a provider, I get provider jealousy. If I have to make a transfer and one thing that I would not have been able to do at home happened at a hospital, I go, well, if I could have just done that right home, would have been fine. So it's a struggle.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah. For my closing question, I don't know if you have one or not, but my closing question, because I know that this is going to be a question that once this is released, you mentioned nutrition supplements a few times, and I know that it's all personalized, but can you kind of tell me how you would suggest women to eat and what some of your favorite supplements are for pregnant women?
So for nutrition, lots of animal protein.
So we want to hear.
Please eat all the red meat, all the organ meats.
Oh, primal baby.
The good eggs, that like 4 to 5 eggs a day.
Yeah.
Like we want you eating, well, nice cooked leafy greens, nuts and seeds, good raw milk, bone broths, like all the good nutrient dense things. We want you lots of antioxidant rich foods so that if there's any like oxidative stress kind of going around that you can kind of help that with nutrition. We always want to hit it with whole foods first, right? And then we take a look at supplementation, and we love Full Well, but also knowing whether you need
Is Full Well a brand?
a brand,
Okay.
Full Well, and they have wonderful fish oil and collagen and all of these things that we just love. Some of our clients are like, "Oh my Lanta, we have to take 8 a day," but it's good.
The fish oils?
The prenatal vitamins.
prenatals, okay.
So 8 of them, So spread
I
out,
learned
kind
5 is
of.
my limit. 5 is my happy place. And then, like, I've been able to take this one prenatals consistently that only requires 5. I'm like, I need 5.
Yeah.
6 and up starts getting rough for me.
And then we love Magnesium Breakthrough by Optimizers. That's
Yes.
great.
I still use
Bad
that.
Magnesium blend.
Yeah, I still use that. It worked wonders.
Yeah. We love all of Earthly's
Oh, Earthly.
products. I'm a big fan of the magnesium cream.
Okay.
Lather it on and go, honey. It's
I used
beautiful.
their postpartum tincture this last time that had like the turmeric and black pepper.
They have a liver love and an
Oh, I had
energy
that.
plus. Like, we love that. Sometimes your liver
Yes.
needs,
Most of the time, you suggest that even through pregnancy to give a little liver.
Love
And
your
if we
liver.
see something in lab work
Right.
that we feel like needs that support, we'll recommend that. I mean, if it doesn't need it, then of course we're not going to recommend that. But vitamin D is usually the lowest, is like one of those deficiencies that we see.
Almost everyone has
Almost
it, yeah.
everyone has it. So
I know. I was surprised when I got my lab work done. I got done at Reboot, and I was like low in the vitamin D area, and I was just like, dude, I'm in the sun all the time. Yeah, you really are. Yeah, I'm like,
Is anyone who catches
but
the
are you
sun
in the
who
sun,
goes to
Nick?
sun?
Yeah, I as much as I can be, as much as I can be. Yeah, I like live in a bikini during the sun. I live on the beach. I can walk to the beach from my house, and I just like live there. But still, it's like, depending on like how much melanin you have in your skin too, it affects how much you're absorbing.
Yeah.
Wow, this has been such a great.
It really has.
We would love to have you back on again.
Thank you for
this has
inviting
been
me.
so
This
much
is really
fun. Thank you
sweet.
so much for
I love you guys.
Where can people find you? Is there any? Do you have any resources that you can send people to? Your website, maybe your Instagram. Like, what do you?
So I'm not really great on social media. I'm a big technology person. And that's kind of one of those kind of boundaries that I had to set for
That's great.
myself because I pour out so much like in the physical that on a screen, I'm just like, oh, I just can't do this. But so I'm midwife at 7 Cities. Midwifery Care. It's owned by Jen Green. She's a wonderful partner. I love practicing with her. And so we have an Instagram page there, 7 Cities of Midwifery Care. And
Which I never see you on there, by the way.
Because 7 was spelled out or 7?
7 Cities, 7 spelled out. Yep.
7 cities.
I don't do a lot on there because I just
Don't like. Where's Sydney at?
Where you at, girl? I'm very transparent. If you never see me, it's like that's the best part I love. If I feel like as a midwife, if I'm the last thing that you remember about your birth, I've done my job. Because I want you to remember that moment of you bringing forth your baby.
Yeah.
Like if you remember me because I was there,
Right.
then that's cool, right? That I helped you get to that part. That's fine. But I definitely don't want to be the first thing that you ever remember. I want to be that one that goes, yeah, Mama, you did that. So I'm okay to not be seen.
Well, thank you so much. We so appreciate having you on.
Thank you for inviting me. We love you, Cookie.